Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin said this week that you've been using coronavirus to keep Americans in fear and maintain control. Take a listen.
Fauci did the exact same thing with AIDS. He overhyped it. He created all kinds of fear, saying it could affect the entire population when it couldn't. And he's using the exact same playbook for COVID.
Obviously, that's a bizarre and false assertion. President George W. Bush gave you the Presidential Medal of Freedom because of your leadership in the AIDS crisis, but I did want to give you an opportunity to respond.
You know, Jake, how do you respond to something as preposterous as that? Overhyping AIDS, it's killed over 750,000 Americans and 36 million people worldwide. How do you overhype that? Overhyping COVID, it's already killed 780,000 Americans and over 5 million people worldwide. So I don't have any clue of what he's talking about.
I don't think he does either. Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
At this point, it's pretty clear that when people like Ron Johnson speak, it's not actually based on anything. It's just a collection of errant thoughts strung together that fall out of his face. And it's good to see Dr. Fauci push back clearly and forcefully and show just how much of a fool Ron Johnson is. Now, first of all, there's this talking point from Republicans that Democrats want more variants. They want the virus to stay here so that they can tell you to wear masks and get vaccinated and stay home because Democrats want to control you. That's the talking point, which is so aggressively backwards, first and foremost because it's Democrats who are practically begging people to get vaccinated, which is the only way to get rid of these variants. When people are not vaccinated, that is the environment in which variants emerge. That is what allows the virus to mutate. So when you have the left pleading with everyone to get vaccinated so that the virus will stop mutating, so that we can be finished with this perpetual pandemic, that doesn't exactly line up with the right-wing talking point that we want to be mired in this thing forever. Republicans who are stuck in their little right-wing bubble think that claiming Democrats want to control you are potent attacks, but they just make the people who say them sound like conspiratorial loons. Democrats are trying to pass bills to give you universal pre-K. They're trying to pass bills to give you paid family leave, trying to pass bills to give you lower drug prices, bills to lower the cost of insulin, bills to combat climate change. Pretty sure that party isn't interested in keeping a pandemic here forever because they somehow get their rocks off by saying people wear masks. Now, as far as Johnson's claim that Fauci is overhyping COVID, that pretty much gives the entire ballgame away in terms of how little Republicans actually care about dead Americans, considering we've already seen the death rate from it. If 10 people had died from COVID and Johnson came on air and opined, wrongly, that we were overhyping COVID, fine. At least there would be some plausible deniability. But how do you watch 770,000 Americans die, the biggest mass casualty event in US history, and think that sounding the alarms on that is overhyping it? There is quite literally no way to overhype a virus that has killed more Americans than any other virus, any other event in our country's history. And by the way, keep in mind that this is the party that brands itself pro-life. This is the party that spent the last week crowing about how we need to gut Roe and outlaw abortion because every life is precious. And yet now we should just relax on those nearly 800,000 dead Americans. At some point, the hypocrisy becomes so clear that the GOP's insistence on being the defenders of life just becomes a parody of itself. The simple fact is this: Republicans need to attack Dr. Fauci because their entire political philosophy revolves around vilifying someone to take any and all blame off of themselves. That's why, during the entirety of Trump's presidency, Republicans and Fox News and Trump himself continued to attack Hillary Clinton for years. It's because the only way they survive is if there's always a boogeyman handy to deflect the responsibility away from their own incompetence. I mean, you can still go to a Trump rally in 2021 and hear lock her up chants about Hillary Clinton. Republicans know that if they can train your attention on their boogeymen, that you'll be too distracted to focus on them. And by the way, this strategy is so obvious that Dr. Fauci himself pointed it out on national TV just last week.
Senator Cruz told the Attorney General you should be prosecuted.
Yeah. I'd have to laugh at that. I should be prosecuted. What happened on January 6th, Senator?
Do you think that this is about making you a scapegoat to deflect from President Trump?
Of course. You have to be asleep not to figure that one out. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science, because I represent science. That's dangerous. To me, that's more dangerous than the slings and the arrows that get thrown at me. And if you damage science, you are doing something very detrimental to society long after I leave.
And that's what this is about. This is about Republicans throwing Fauci under the bus because they need someone to distract from their egregious incompetence. And so they home in on one person and attack them over and over and over and over on every network, by every host, by every politician, by every pundit, until they've convinced their audience that, look how many people are blaming Dr. Fauci. It must be true. He must be to blame. It is a coordinated gaslighting campaign to destroy someone else to protect themselves. And what makes that all the more shameful is the fact that the person they're blaming is actually helping them and their viewers. Remember, Fauci's the guy who helped found a cure for vasculitis. He's the guy who helped lead us through the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. He's the guy who got us through H1N1 and SARS and West Nile and Ebola and Zika and now through COVID, despite unfathomable opposition by an entire political party that is hell-bent on allowing it to spread. Meanwhile, the people out there like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz are on the side of no masks during a pandemic, on the side of mass gatherings during a pandemic, on the side of fully reopened businesses and restaurants during a pandemic. These people are directly responsible for the loss of life during the deadliest pandemic in US history, and yet they have the audacity to blame the immunologist? Give me a break. So please, try to look beyond the politics, beyond the tribalism, and recognize the agenda of these Republicans who spend their days attacking someone who they owe their own health and safety to. Try to remember that the same people opposing safety measures have benefited from them themselves. It's because they'll sacrifice public health, your health, if it means they can notch a political win. Because for them, hurting Democrats is more important than the survival of their own constituents. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.